All right. So we're live, I guess, and welcome everyone to that's the second release party. I think we missed one in between, and I hope everyone is fine. And today we are having all of our advocates, so my whole team basically, and we will walk you through a few things. So first, just to make you familiar with everyone, if you don't know us yet, so we have Khalid first, the first tile over there, then Rachel. On the below that we have Matt on the left and Maarten on the right. I do want to give you a quick intro about what you can expect today. So we will focus on a few things that are new in the 2021.1 release in ReSharper and Rider. And we will start actually with me showing a few general things about Rider. Then we will head over to Rachel, who shows some publishing thing. Maarten will cover all the UI things that are new, including Avalonia, WinForms, etc. Matt will cover the debugger, so plenty of stuff also there. Khalid already wrote the Dockerfile blog post, so he will also cover Docker during this show. Rachel will scaffolding. Maarten will show us something about space. That's going to be interesting. And we have me again with some ReSharper bits and Matt with Unity. Okay, I haven't heard a word yet, so is everyone partying?
Yeah, we're contemplating heavily our demos.
All right. So I guess I will start, and I haven't mentioned that yet. If at any point you have questions, the advocates as well as you as a watcher, don't hesitate. We will try to address that as we go. And otherwise, yeah, well, have fun, I guess. And we will start with me, like I said. So, and that is, I'm not showing you our great. Let's see. It takes a moment to get familiar here. But I'm not showing you the actual new splash screen that we have. But I want to start with something that is new and is quite important. So this is something you might know if we clone something. We can do this right from the splash screen. But the important bit here is, and that is new, is we get a new dialog, which should show up any second. And this is this. So we introduced a dialog that makes you aware that whenever you're opening a solution, a .NET solution, that potentially malicious code could get executed. And that's quite important. Not everyone knows that. I do think a majority will know about that already. But otherwise, the first time you're executing or opening a solution, you will get this dialog. And also you can exclude under settings, can exclude certain directories, particularly if you already have a lot of directories checked out. You might, organize them and then just trust and open. Otherwise, I don't want to open this now, but the next thing I want to show you is something about solution load. So Rider already is quite fast opening solutions, but one thing that has bothered a lot of people, I guess, is when you're opening your solution, I will open my own project here. Then what you see is on the left, as soon as the Solution Explorer should show. Okay, I guess video takes a while with my Mac, and having 5 advocates in the stream. And actually, this takes quite a long time.
By the way, just in case you did not know, we are professional developer advocates. So that means we stream and we select all of the high qualities options when we see them here in our streaming platform. So that's probably what we're seeing here.
Yes, so it's a bit hard on my Mac, I guess.
I'm surprised we can hear you over the fans going there.
Oh, really?
No, we can hear you fine. You're doing great.
Okay.
That was dry British humor, by the way. So.
I'll apologize. I'll have subtitles and I'll explain. I'll say this. I'm going to do a joke in a minute. It's good. I'm sorry. I'll leave it to it.
Let me explain the feature. So you might notice that it was already opening one of my projects here, and that is basically it. What we added. That although it seems slow, but trust me, usually it's not. It's the video capturing and all. But it will remember the context that you worked last time, and it will open the photo structure until that particular node where you were editing. And also it doesn't need the full solution load as usually, because that's what it's basically showing, but it will save that in between, basically, between your editing sessions. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is also right-click here. On your solution node, you can go to Tools and then Manage .NET and .NET Core SDK. And from here, for everyone who hasn't heard about the global JSON file, that is the file that you can add to your repository to make sure that even your colleague, for instance, after checking out the repository, will use the exact same, not necessarily the exact same version, but you can specify the requirements for the SDK version that should be used. So in my case, I have selected the 5.0 release, and you can also choose if you would allow the latest minor, let's say, or the latest major, whatever you prefer, basically. And of course, you can also allow pre-release versions to be used. I think that's quite important, especially, you want to make, if you have your repositories, you want them at least being compilable, being able to open on your colleague's machine. And the next thing, and for that I will jump to a little bit of code example right here, is we have, and it doesn't look, yeah, now it's fully loaded. We have unified our quick and hover docs. And if you don't know what I mean by that, so the first is, let's say if we hover this target type right here, then you see this has a, okay, now it moved a bit. This has looked differently before. It used a little bit of less color, let's say. And as you can guess, let's take this example here. For instance, colors make that a bit more easy to parse on our eyes, particularly if you have attributes there, etc. And those two things, quick docs and hover docs, so quick doc is that I just invoked, they now use the same engine, and that also lets them show exceptions, returns, example code, etc. Yeah. So I think that was my part for now. And we will jump over to, I think Rachel is next, right? Rachel, do you have your screen shared already? Yes, you have.
Yes.
And so it's visible.
Good. So let's take a look at publishing. We have a few new options for publishing. If I want to deploy my app, I have a lot of different ways to go about it, depending on if you're publishing legacy or something new to Azure or however you're deploying. But if we're writing in .NET, there's a couple things we want to be able to do. Is one, we want to be able to set up a publishing profile to be able to reuse that and republish as we make updates. And then also, a few versions back, I think around .NET Core 3, Microsoft introduced publishing to single file deployment, which gave us different options where we can deploy just a single DLL instead of breaking it apart. And this gives us more options for attaching with the debugger, as well as optimizations and some other cool stuff when it's published. So if I want to go ahead and set this up, I can easily enough go to my app, right-click and do an add, and I'll pick a publish profile. And I can have one or more of these. It just creates a small file in my app. And I'll just web deploy to a local IIS and give it a name. And that just adds this XML file. In this XML file, what I need to supply is the information of where IIS is. And in this case, I have a little application called PubTest in IIS ready to go. So I just changed the deploy IIS path. You'll see that that shows up here under Publish Profiles under My Properties. I can then take this app and then actually publish it. now that I have stored all of that information. You can pick IIS, local, server, or Azure. And any of these work with a published profile, but you can also kind of create them as you go. If you're using Azure, you could download a published profile and then add it into your app. So you could build it here or add it in. So I'll just pick IIS. And in here, I'll select that published profile that I had created. And here I get to check off the options that I want for deploying and click Run. And then once I run, it might take it a little bit of time, as things do.
I would also
really
like
Mac
to
or
test
Windows.
it up again.
Yeah, it's not the Mac Windows thing. It's just that it has to go and build and create a whole bunch of assets. And then off it goes. It sends it off to IIS. And the thing that you'll notice is here, now it's saved it as a configuration. So I can run this at any time. So it does all of this for me so that I don't have to keep running it. So we have some nice publish options now. And with this, if you check off that little box, you can just publish it to a single DLL as well, which is quite nice. And that'll just keep going for a while, and then it'll show up as, if it didn't bomb by now, it's going to be successful. It'll be fine. It just deployed again. There we go. So I got a little succeed. So we're good with publishing. If you don't have a whole lot to publish, this is as long as it takes. It doesn't take very long for a lot of apps that are not very complex, just to send it out off to the cloud or to your IIS server or wherever. So whoever's up next can go.
Cool. I remember we also have actually one question from the audience. Please add, or more like, feature request, please add the option include native libraries for self-extract. I've seen that before, I think, from someone else being mentioned. Also, I think maybe trim while publishing might also make sense, right? In some situations. I think that checkbox we also don't have yet. Okay, the next is Maarten, as far as I can see. Where's your screen, Maarten? There.
My screen is there, yes. And I'll start with this beautifully looking WinForms designer. It's really back to WinForms, essentially. Actually, there's a lot of people working on WinForms, and that's why we keep investing in that and making the experience better. So you'll have the designer that's been there for a long time. But in this new version, we've actually made it easier for you to work with components from vendors like DevExpress, Syncfusion, Telerik, and so on. So what you can do is in the designer toolbox here, you can manage the components of whatever you want to work with in terms of components, and essentially navigate to where you installed them on disk and enable or disable the controls that you want to drag onto your form and start working with. So in this case, I've actually installed a NuGet package that has a number of additional controls that I can use in my project. There's a drop-down button there. I haven't yet figured out how it works, but essentially what you can do is then select that one and then move it onto your form. This is a little small, so let's make that a little bit bigger so we can actually click it when we run this thing. I'll add an event handler there as well and say message box.show hello once that runs, and then we can simply run this and make use of that new component. So nothing truly mind-blowing here, just that you can now properly work with third-party controls, and all of that is a little bit easier to manage and work with licenses from third parties, etc. So my message box works. By the way, now that I'm here, there's one additional thing. This is not new in Rider. It's been there for a long time. But if you're doing things that are being printed or shown in the UI, so in this case, the hello string is going in a message box, so that's UI, you will see this squiggly where Rider suggests to localize this thing, because obviously if you have an application that has UI, maybe at some point you want to start localizing things, and this is one of the inspections that you'll see there, where you can quickly move this to a resource and you can start translating your application if needed. All right, so that's WinForms. Let's move to the other UI framework that exists, and that is XAML and WPF. So in Rider 2021.1, we really completely reworked the previewer for WPF. So you'll see that previously in earlier versions that this was a Yeah, essentially a view-only preview where you could not do a lot of things. We've actually been reworking that quite a bit. So first of all, if you now have something like a tab control, for example, you can actually make use of those tabs and look at whatever is there by just clicking in that preview and going through it. Also, you'll see if you select one of the items somewhere that the editor also jumps to that control that you have there. So if you want to work with this button, for example, you can see it gets selected in here, but also vice versa. If you select one of the list items on the first tab there, we have to go to our first tab, of course, but if you select one of the list items, you'll also see the blue border around it showing that I just selected John or Mary or whoever in this list. A couple of other things that, yeah, go ahead.
It works basically like the scroll to from with the Solution Explorer, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So it's just following along where you are in either the preview or in the editor, and things will follow along. Yeah. One additional thing that is there, very often if you're building a WPF application, you'll see that maybe you want to design your control or your form in a specific way, but still see something different in the designer. So there's a couple of properties that allow you to set, for example, the height when you're using the design height here. You'll see that we now also respect that. So the design height of 100 is applied here. If we make that at 50, for example, you'll see that the button is going to go and become smaller. But in the UI, when you run this application, things will just look as you expect without making that small modification there. Maybe one more thing to add. There's also, for people building WPF applications, there's a XAML styler. It's actually an open source project that you can use to style your entire source code using whatever you configure there. It has a command line tool, but also the XAML styler folks have been writing a plugin for Rider that you can install. And once it's installed, you can actually format your XAML with XAML styler as well. You can also do this on save or on edits, but I'm now invoking it manually. And you'll see that you can rewrite everything according to the guidelines in terms of styling that have been created there. All right, there's a couple of other things that I want to show you with a different UI framework, and that is going to be Avalonia. So Avalonia is a cross-platform UI framework that you can use in .NET. It also makes use of XAML, so very similar to how you work with WPF, for example. It has a very, very similar experience. It's just XAML. You have controls there. You have an editor that you can work with. And they have been hard at work in making this framework cross-platform and just working on Mac, on Windows, and on Linux. And in Rider, we've been working with the Avalonia folks to make support for Avalonia better. Now, what you can do is, because we don't ship everything out of the box, so editing is in Rider out of the box. But what you can do is also install the Avalonia Rider plugin. And once you have that one installed, you'll also get a previewer for whatever UI that you are building. So I'm going to save my plugins here. I'm not going to restart Rider because I want to sneak in another new thing that we have in Rider here, which is finally, I imagine, in Windows or on Windows, we now have jump list support. So you'll see all of these things there, and you can quickly jump into another solution that you may have on your system. That was a nice and sneaky way of bringing that up. By the way, while we wait for Rider to load, and I'll quickly show a little bit more of that as well, Avalonia is really growing, and they are doing awesome work with their UI. And we've actually changed dotTrace and dotMemory's home screen in this release by using Avalonia. So this is all cross-platform WPF XAML. dotMemory and dotTrace are not yet cross-platform, but you'll also already see that some efforts are being made in reworking that UI using a WPF-like approach using Avalonia. And actually, this home screen is Avalonia. But before we dive into that one, let's switch back to Rider.
Is there actually a plan to also move with other components to Avalonia?
Yeah. The idea is so. dotMemory and dotTrace have been written in WPF completely, and the idea is to take whatever we have there, maybe redesign a couple of bits and move everything into using Avalonia, which is quite nice, I think.
Cool, yeah.
So this is an Avalonia project, a very, very simple to-do list. If you run it, you'll see that it's a really simple to-do list where you can add some items and things like that. So it will run. We should see a form pop up. I hope, yes, there we go. Walk the dog, buy some milk. We can add some stuff in there as well. So a very simple application using cross-platform XAML using Avalonia. What's cool is that we have editor support, of course. The plugin also adds a couple of item templates where if you want to create, for example, a new form in Avalonia, you get all of these resources there and you can quickly create a new window or a new user control and things like that. And also, as I mentioned, if you install this Avalonia Rider plugin, you'll also get a previewer where you'll see the add an item form, for example, or if we go to another one where you can enter your to-do and the OK and cancel button are there, you will see those in the previewer. This is slightly less rich than the one that we currently have for WPF, but you can imagine a lot of things are shared there. So yeah, strides are being made to make this even nicer to work with. Then one more thing. Quickly want to show you again that in dotMemory and dotTrace, we've adopted Avalonia for our new home screen. The home screen has been redesigned because we want to make use of Avalonia, but also because we thought that the experience of starting to profile an application could be nicer. Very often people are profiling their applications only when allocations hit the fan. And that's when you want to jump in and use a profiler, and you'll see that if you have processes running, you can easily attach to them manually and just start profiling. If you want to create a new run configuration there, you can do so as well and just start working with any application type that all of the profilers supports. And then maybe one more. This is also
one last thing.
UI. Yeah, just one more last thing. If you have a snapshot, this UI is still WPF, so we're also reworking that one. But one interesting thing that I find that we've added is that we now have, over the entire timeline of your application, we keep track of allocations, memory usage, and so on. So you'll see as I move my cursor along that all of these values also change. So you can easily identify when garbage collection happened, for example, or when more objects were allocated on large object heap and things like that. And with that,
becoming more important from day to day.
Absolutely.
I gotta say, Maarten, during your part, we went up by like 30 viewers, so I could let you talk even longer. But I do have one question here, and that is there any ETA for .NET Core WPF preview support?
That's a really good question, and I know it's going to sound a little bit like a stuck record, but we are working on that. It'll come, but I have no ETA. Sorry. Okay,
so keep tracking us on Twitter, our blog, etc. And I guess
absolutely,
we will get the word out as soon as it's there. Okay, I think that's it for the UI part. Next on my list is Matt with the debugger.
Okay, well that'll be me.
Yeah, I need to switch the screen again. And
yeah, that's me. That's my screen. Yeah, so I got some cool things to show with debugging. I like the dotMemory, the dotTrace thing there, showing the timeline swipe on that. I didn't know that one. That's a nice one. So that one's new for me. I like that. I got a few debugging things to show as to what's new, and the first thing I want to show is from the home screen we've got here, from the standard Rider welcome screen that we've got. This was redesigned in 2020.3, and in 2021.1 we've added a new page to it. So we've got the project page, which is what you probably know and love, and how to use it, and you can just start typing to filter things down and open stuff. We've got the tutorials page, which is really good to take you through how you use the product, and it takes you through some of the basics and teaches you some useful things. And this time around, we've added an attached to process tab, which makes it very easy to quickly get in and start debugging an application. So being on a Mac, there's not that many .NET processes running all at once. I've got a little application sample app down the bottom here running, which we can look at. But if this page will list all sorts of .NET processes you got running, it'll list your .NET Core processes, .NET Framework. If you're on Windows, it'll show UWP processes, which have got .NET in them. list all the processes which require elevation, and also things like your IIS worker processes as well. So you can attach to your app pools and debug your processes there. And it's very easy to run. You just click on the item that you want, and then Rider immediately launches and starts debugging, which is great. So the debugger is launched, attached to the app, and we're good to go. We don't have a solution, but what we have instead is the list of assemblies that are loaded in the process at the moment. And so we've got all the different assemblies we've got. So we've got debugging demo, but we've also got system collections, system.link, Newtonsoft.json. We can sort of expand this out and click on something, and Rider will decompile those types on the fly. It'll download them if necessary and show us things. So I can go to something like JSON converts. And then if I go and search for deserialized objects, then it'll show me a whole load of different deserialized objects, loads of overloads. Let's go and find a good one.
Matt, would you actually say, and I was kind of wondering when I first time saw that, would you say that it's kind of a works the same way as the modules debugger window in Visual Studio?
Yeah, it's very similar because it's showing you all the assemblies that are currently loaded in the process. So those are the only the assemblies that the process has got loading. As as I'll step through now, more will get loaded, and that list will get added to it. But it kind of gives it in a nice browsable way so that you can see the types that are in there, and you can navigate to them, and you can do fun things like if you go to JSON convert deserialized object, you can just put a breakpoint there. So this is decompiled code, which you can add a breakpoint to, and you can go with it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the debugger now because we haven't seen any of our real code. So just pause the debugger. If I just swap back to my little app there, it's just a console app which is waiting for me to hit enter. And you can see here we're stuck in reading standard in standard in reader, part of the framework itself, but you can see we've got proper comments here. We've downloaded the source code, and we were actually using the real source code there to debug, which is pretty cool. I could put a breakpoint here as well and step through it, but I'm just going to go down the call stack, back to my actual program here. I'm in main. I can put a breakpoint there, and if I continue and then just quickly go and hit enter, then we're back at a debugging, and now I'm sort of debugging an application. So I quickly attach to a process. I can see all the assemblies that are there, and I can just sort of step through and start running. And there we go. I'm hitting the breakpoint in my third-party code, which is decompiled and everything. So it's pretty cool. I like that. So let me just put a breakpoint there and carry on. Oh yeah, I should have shown you. I can step through that as well. Obviously, it's third-party code. I don't just be able to hit a breakpoint. I can step through it, step in, look at the variables, and so on. Well, you'll also see as well the items on the left-hand side now. The assemblies list, our list of loaded modules, that's increased now. We've got loaded a whole load more just through doing deserialized object. Next thing I want to show you, really, this applies for debugging, whether it's just attaching to the debugger like we've just done, or whether you're debugging your own project from within a solution, is these interactive hints. So we've always shown you kind of the value of variables on the editor itself. Here you can see JSON, the text I read in as JSON being shown on the screen there. You can show me the count is 0. I haven't assigned it yet. We're about to. Count is 0, and that we've got our list of people with a count of 4. We've made these hints interactive now, so you can click on them and you get to see what's inside there, and it gives you a bit more useful things, and you can expand them out and see, select things, and we've got this sort of link down here, keyboard shortcut F2, and then I can start changing my values there, and it'll update things. So we can do interactive code right within the editor itself.
I do have one question.
Yes,
I do have one question. When does that pop-up disappear? Because I remember that was such a pain point working with tooltips, like in when you inspect a variable, etc. That was a pain point before, because as soon as you slip too far with your mouse, it just disappears again.
Yeah, so we got a couple of different ways of doing things. So we've got the sort of hover tooltip, which we can do here. So I can hover over that, and that will disappear as I move things away. And it gives you enough time to sort of move around and navigate around. But when you kind of expand something, then you can move the mouse wherever you want, and it's fine. And I kind of have to click away basically for it to disappear. Same here. It's there until I click and close it. So it's not just hover and if you miss it disappears, and that, especially when you're kind of expanding things and navigating down and trying to get into something. It's that could be tricky.
Okay, then I'm happy.
Well, as long as you're happy, then I'm happy. We're all happy. This is good. We got asked a question a little bit earlier as well about can you show something about some of the evaluation options we've got? And so these features aren't particularly new, but we can evaluate items here. So we've got an evaluate expression dialog here, which you can just type into. If you hover over that, you get to see the keyboard shortcut. That's the crazy Mac symbol for Alt. So Alt F8 would open that, and then I can just type something like people, and it will evaluate something, or I can do people.count and I get code completion. I can even do interesting things. Let's see if this works with lambdas in there. p.name.contains maps. And there we go. We get a link sort of iterated there, and I can expand the results. And apparently there's nothing in there. Well, I'm a bit surprised at that. I thought I was in there, but maybe not.
But the really cool thing, and I kind of want to point that out again, in that text box, even if something is not yet imported, like for extension methods, etc., you have basically the same experience as inside the editor, and you can import it just from there, and it will still properly compile. And that is so cool in the debugger that it just works, and you don't have to, I don't know, make adjustments to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. It just works. Rider will sort of bring those in for you, gives you the auto completion. It's great. You can do lambdas as well, which is very cool actually in the debugger. That is technically very difficult to do, and it just works like you expect it to, which I like a lot. Other useful things you can do is you can obviously add a watch. So I could do people.count there, and that will then update as I go through, or I can just remove that. I've got an immediate window, so I can type things here as well, and it'll dump things out into immediate window. I can create a new person there. Okay, it's going to be empty. What have I done wrong there? That should be right. I forgot the semicolon. There we go. So it creates an empty person. I wasn't set up for this, or I'd have created something with a constructor, and you would be able to pass things in the constructor, and it would give you that there. And if we go at the top there, it remembers the PP that I've created. Admittedly, everything's empty, but there we go. We could change those. Name Mr. Nobody isn't a string. There we go. So we've got a sort of an immediate window which we can use. We've got watch variables, and then one last feature which I think is really cool. Where can I show this, which is going to actually work? This one here, I think. If you hold down the Alt key and hover over an expression, you can click on that and it'll evaluate the whole expression. And that's really cool. That's a very useful way of doing something which is going to be a full expression. You can hit Alt, it'll select it for you, and it'll show it there. And that's going to show me the whole results. You'll note that it didn't include the first or default. If I hover over first or default, it does the whole expression, and it'll tell me what the answer is going to be. So really cool. So there's a lot of different ways of evaluating your code in there. So yeah. To get back to some of the things for the new release, we've got a couple of useful things with options. We've got a debugger options page here, which has got a ton of useful stuff on here. Some really cool things which are helpful as you go. You can flatten an object hierarchy, for example, which means that when you expand an object, anything which is defined in base classes will all be shown just straight in line. Otherwise, you get a base group which you have to open, and you can sort of step through the hierarchy there. Same sort of thing with non-public members. By you can show just the public API, as it were, or you can have it include private or protected fields and properties. Grouping bigger arrays. If you've got an array of 20,000 items, you can group them here. So you're going to show 100 at a time. The two new ones for 2021.1 are this add raw view for debugger browsable values, and I'll come back to that. And the other one is show compiler generated members. This is a little bit niche, I have to say, but it's pretty cool at the same time. So these are off by default. I've got them switched on here. If I go into where are we? Let's go and have a look at a person here. So if we have a look at Matt Ellis there, we've got these non-public members, and you can expand it there. We're showing the compiler-generated backing fields here. So this person type has some auto properties, and it's now we can see the backing fields which the compiler creates for you. This isn't particularly useful in the case of auto properties, perhaps, because an auto property will just show you what the backing field is. But it's a bit more interesting if you've got something like link. So if I put a breakpoint here, Rider wants to know, do I want to put a breakpoint on the whole expression or just on the lambda? I'm going to do that. And if I run this now, we hit the breakpoint. And we can see we've got a person checking the country. We've got this default country value that's there. We've now got this. We've now got a this item in our variables window, and it's pointing to the snappily titled program.angle_c_display class 0_0, which is not a class that I made up. It's something which the compiler created to hold the lambda. So it's got all the data in there for the lambda itself. And you can see it kind of echoes the values that are being used inside the lambda, and it's showing us actually that we've also captured extra data. So this lambda doesn't include default person, but the class which holds the lambda does. It's showing us there. And it's kind of a useful way to sort of see some of the code that's being done and being generated for you. It's also going to be useful for asynchronous code, the async state machines and stuff, which is quite fun. Now, the other thing which we had, the other option we had there was debugger browsable. This is an attribute you can apply to something here, which tells the debugger how to display something. So we've got a couple of different options there. We can sort of have collapsed, never, root only, and so on. We've got here a skill level value that is being hidden. So if we go back to our person list and we, in fact, our person there, which is Maarten, we don't have skill level being shown because it's hidden. But we've now got a raw view item here. And if I expand that, then the debugger will show everything, including the things that have been hidden by the attributes, and we get our skill level there. And I'm clearly being far too nice to Maarten there, so I'll need to do something about fixing that. But yeah, so that shows us our debuggable options.
I'm totally fine with awesome, by the way.
Awesome. Where are I? Reasonable. There we go. That's British humor for you as well.
Awesome, no?
That is British for awesome. Yes, quite good. Last thing with debugger then is something which I can't actually show you because it's actually just going to work, hopefully. But there are, when we look at a class such as person here, we're looking at properties. And properties under the hood are implemented as methods. You get a getter method and a setter method. And to evaluate those, we have to invoke the method. There are times when the runtime does not let us invoke methods. So if you're paused at a garbage collection or at certain points, then you're not allowed to invoke methods. And that's really awkward when you want to just look at the value of a property. And so what we've done is we've actually, in certain circumstances, we will interpret a property. And this is great for things like auto properties, again, where it's very simple and very straightforward to do. We can interpret that, and you can always show you the value, even when evaluation is not enabled. So that's very cool, and hopefully it should just work for you and just mean that you get to see more information about your code more frequently and by default. So that's good. And then I think that's me, unless there are any questions. Are we good?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions.
Oh, Matthias, you're muted.
Damn it. Yeah, I just realized.
Professional.
I don't think we had any questions that could be covered in this format here, but if you feel you can always reach out to us. So I just want to mention that too. But by the way, this is pretty cool what you show with the Alt key and then evaluating an expression. That also works with my favorite feature with this, which is expand and shrink selection. So with that, you can also just expand the selection, and whenever something is selected, it will show you the actual value for that. So that's can be pretty cool. Also, to not leave your keyboard, right? Because leaving keyboard always takes a couple of seconds. Adds up.
Always.
Okay, the next on my list is Khalid with Docker. And Khalid, I have to check where's his screen. Here's his screen. Your screen is there.
Okay. If you can see my screen. You can see it?
Yes, yes.
All right, cool. So I've actually written a couple blog posts about Docker, and I've also done a JetBrains guide tutorial on Docker specifically for .NET developers. So hopefully we can leave a link in the description below to that guide. I think it's really helpful. So, but to get to the specific feature in the latest version of Rider, from the welcome screen, hopefully you folks have more projects than I do here, but from the welcome screen, we're going to go ahead and click New Solution. And when we get the New Solution dialog, most folks will notice all the templates that come with .NET Core and .NET 5 by extension. What folks might not actually realize when looking at the New Solution screen is all these templates are actually generated by the SDK. So these are my .NET 5 templates. But if I go in here and I go to the latest and greatest, you'll actually see more templates. And over here are some of the MAUI templates. But that's beyond the point. But if you have .NET 5, you'll actually start noticing in some of the certain templates that ship with .NET 5 that there's a brand new dialog box right here, Docker support. So Docker support actually works with console application, ASP.NET Core application, and worker service. So any kind of background service that you have can also kind of be Dockerized or containerized. For this example, I'm just going to stick with console application because it's the simplest and kind of gets the point across either way. So in this dropdown, we can choose to disable Docker support completely. We can choose Linux, which I would recommend. Linux is probably the most prevalent, containerization base image that you can have. So use that. You can also choose Windows. So if you have any specific Windows dependencies that can only run in a Windows environment, I hate to say it, but like if you have a COM dependency or ActiveX dependency, I'm sorry. But if you do have those, you can choose Windows Docker image. So in this case, we have a console application. We can set the project name. We can choose the SDK language. And for this case, we'll pick Linux Docker support. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create. Wow, it's so fast. So what folks might not actually realize is Rider uses the .NET CLI templates under the covers, and that's what's actually generating my project and solution files. Now that we have Docker support, you'll actually notice here in the Solution Explorer that we have two new files. It's probably easier to start with the .dockerignore file. If you're familiar with Git and source control, this file basically just tells Docker when it's building your container or your image for your containers to ignore these files when it copies over into the image. So as you can see, these are really development files. They're not very important for running your application, things like your Git and Git ignore, maybe some IDE or editor settings, and the license and README. If you want to ship licenses with your product, you might want to remove license, but that's really up to you. So let's just jump to the Dockerfile. And you'll kind of immediately notice some of the signature icons that show up in Rider in the editor. Right here, we have a run on Docker, chevrons. And over here on each step in the Dockerfile, file, you have these little hammer icons. And basically, anytime you click one of these, you can actually run the build up to that certain point. So for folks not familiar with Docker, the Dockerfile is really like a step-by-step guide in terms of how to build our final image that will run as a container. So on the very first line, since we picked the .NET 5 SDK, we want our application to ultimately run on the .NET runtime image. So in this case, we're going to pull down the runtime image, and then we're going to set a working directory of app. in the next section, we're actually going to pull down a different image completely, which we'll use to actually build our .NET 5 application. You're seeing things that you would normally run through the .NET CLI, or you'd have Rider run, things like .NET Restore and .NET Build here. And then once we build our application, we're actually going to use this same image that we've created here to actually read the built assets or artifacts, and then run that to publish our application. And then finally, we'll create a final image to run our application.
Khalid, this is a Docker noob question from my side. You mentioned the hammer icon will then execute until that point. So is there a difference between the last hammer icon and the chevron on the left, upper left?
So all of these steps basically create intermediary images. The way Docker works is like it's almost like Git, right? So each layer is an immutable read-only layer. And ultimately what we're doing here is we're building these layers. The fact that they're dependent on each other, so final needs to use publish and publish needs to use build, basically if I click this, which I'll do now and trigger it, oh yeah, it couldn't find it because we didn't build that step. But if I come here and I say run on Docker, we're going to go ahead and pull all those images down, as you can kind of see. And we're going to go through all these steps and publish and do those things as well. So the crazy, the Docker files are always interesting. Like the Docker container image names are always interesting. So here's the crazy Chandrasekhar container. And when I run it, you can actually see it. So the difference is that you can rerun a particular layer using these icons. So hopefully I answered your question, Matthias.
Yeah, and you know what? Every time I'm using Docker, I feel quite productive because it's doing all those things. It's downloading and stuff and building, and I don't have to do anything except clicking a button.
Yeah, it's really like the services window is really an unsung hero in Rider as well. You can kind of see the intermediary images being created. So this one here was created 50 seconds ago, and this one here should also be 56 seconds ago. So this is probably one of these earlier images being created, and then this is the latter one. You can also come in here and see, your container ID. We can see the log. So the log is what actually executed inside Docker and some of the container IDs. So another nice thing is if I was running an ASP.NET Core application, I could come in here. Let me move this up here. And I can actually add additional ports. Let me go back a second. You can see some of the .NET images already have some environment variables set. So here we have port 80. If you want to expose that, you can come in here. We can say to port 8080. Oh, that's the IP. You want to put it here, and then the container port that we're hosting ASP.NET on is port 80. So you click OK, and then you save, and then our container should restart, which it does. And now we have that port exposed to my local macOS host, basically. So all this stuff is actually working specifically with Docker Desktop. So you do need Docker Desktop for Docker support to work in Rider. But it's kind of a nice addition to .NET Core to have these kind of starter Docker files, especially for console applications, web applications, and worker services. So yeah, get started with this. This definitely works with, I've tried it with .NET 3.1, .NET Core 3.1, .NET 5, and I've also tested with .NET 6. As long as these images exist, this should just work right out of the box. So
I have a quick question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
So if I already have an existing project, is there a way to re-add these? Because you now showed creating a new solution. But I think a lot of people already have a solution, want to get started with Docker. Is that possible?
Okay, let's try it. I think we can. So let's try to create a new solution. We're going to say disabled, right? I forgot to add Docker file support. All right. So my solution is loading, and I think it's in here somewhere, right? I forget though. I was pretty sure there was a way to add Docker support, but I forget exactly how. So I'll have to look that up for folks, and maybe we'll leave a link to that in the comments. So, but I was pretty sure you could add it after the fact, but maybe maybe my configuration isn't set properly. Oh, is it here?
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Yep. So you right click, you go to add, and you say Docker support. And this is the same exact dropdown that we saw. We can select Linux or Windows. Obviously, we don't want to pick disabled because we're adding it. And then we get the same exact files that were created.
I was about to say you have 40 minutes to find it. But yeah, better this way. And I do remember what you can also do, and I really appreciate that from the services window you can attach to a container. I do remember the first time I used Docker. I mean, it's quite some time ago, but actually attaching to someone was also always a bit of a, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but it was a bit of a pain. But anyway, yeah, that works great too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can debug directly inside of Docker. So if I was, I don't know if I have enough time, if folks want to see it, we can, but we can also continue as well.
Hard to say. How much time does it take?
It doesn't take very long. I mean, you just run your container. So you say run on Docker. And then you should have the run configuration. So once this container builds and publishes, which it has, and it has run, we have the run configuration now here, and we just hit debug. So I've already set a breakpoint. So once it actually publishes, it's running, we should hit this breakpoint. It takes a little bit of time sometimes, but yep, now we're debugging inside of Docker. So that's it.
Really cool. Yeah. That was 2 minutes of my time for you.
Oh, thank you. I feel gracious, very gracious. Thank you.
You feel loved, yeah. Just saying. Okay, next on my list is Rachel with scaffolding. And sorry, Rachel's screen is here. Should be good. And you're muted. I can unmute you. Yes,
there we go. I
unmuted you.
So scaffolding is a great feature to have, and you can run it through the CLI. That's fine, but a lot of people don't care for the command line, just as many who do, and it's now a feature in Rider. So this is pretty awesome. If I have an MVC or a Razor Pages app, and here I have an MVC app, I can go ahead and start scaffolding away and creating all kind of great assets for my applications. So I have a simple to-do class here, and I'm going to go ahead and scaffold a whole entire little CRUD set of assets for it. So an index, a details, a create, an edit, and a delete page. So I could do that by just right-clicking and doing add new scaffolded item. And look at all the goodies in here. You get everything from areas to API and MVC controllers. You can just go for very basic empty ones to the full ones with entity framework and Razor Pages and even identity scaffolding. So there's all the scaffolding options are basically covered here. So I'll do my MVC controller with views using entity framework. So I'll just call it to-do controller because that's where it starts, and hit enter. And then a little dialog pops up asking what I want to call it. And I already provided that, but I can change it here. I'll pick my model And if I had a data context class, I could select that, but I don't. So I will allow Rider to make this for me. So I'll just click add. And I have generate views picked off already because I selected the EF with views as well. And I could choose a layout page if I want to use them. Often we want to do that. And I just click add and wait a few minutes while it actually goes and it builds a CSHTML and .cshtml.cs for each of the views, plus the controller and all of the action methods that are inside of the controller. So it does take a minute or two, and when it does, we get a full deck of everything. Also, you'll see under the data folder, it will create a context as well. So it does basically everything. And then after this, all we would need to do is just run like .NET EF update to actually update the database if we wanted to do that at that time. But here I could see it's going through. It started the scaffolding. It has full verbatim document. It's documenting everything it does, right? So I get to see this here. It's generating the controller now, and then I'll see a bunch of views popping up very soon. There's my data context that I'm working with. So really easy to point and click and create a bunch of boilerplate code without having to do a whole lot. And then I could go in there and modify them as I want to.
Yeah, Rachel, I'd like to add, I've played around with this, and it does use the dot generator stuff from the .NET team. There is one annoyance for me, and I think it's being worked on, and a fix is coming, but it assumes by default that you want to use SQL Server and adds that package, even if you've specified maybe Postgres provider or SQLite. So just keep that in mind, that even when you run these scaffolding, you might get a SQL Server NuGet reference, even if you're using a different database. So just keep that in mind. Yep.
Yeah, so here you could see it created the controller, all of the actions that go with it, the context itself, and under views, there's my to-do, and all of my assets that go with that. Also in the startup, you'll see that it adds the context in here. So here's where you could just go and change that to whatever other thing you're using that's not SQL Server. So that's been pretty easy for me to go in and change that. And you have your set of scaffolded items. Now, if I'm going to add other scaffolded items, I'll come in here and do a new. The other ones that are just empty or read-write, they're very, very basic. Let's just try a quick read-write scaffolding. And it just takes it a second because all it's doing is just building a controller with a couple of action methods in it. The same for the Razor Pages one. If I do the full EF, it'll take the longest because it actually has to go through and do everything. Other than that, the rest of them are pretty basic, right? Because you have your empty ones, or they just have the read-write actions, which just have like an index and a couple other stubs, but they don't have any of the EF code or anything like that in it. Razor Pages come with pages and the code behind, if you will, for them. Also, a thing to note is sometimes I forget, and I did it here. If you just run this from the root like I did, this will show up in the root. So be sure to go ahead and run that right on the controllers. Or if you're doing a Razor Pages, run it off of your pages to get those. Now notice here, it just created a controller for me, the scaffolding controller. It didn't create the views because this time I didn't ask for it. I simply asked for read-write with views. So here I just get all of the stubs, and that's that. The cool thing now is out of Rider, I could do an Alt-Enter, and I can then click on Create Razor Views, and it will create that for me however I want it. Now, again, I would want to put these in the correct directories, but this is very, very handy to be able to piece it together as you need.
Yeah. Did I get this right, Khalid? It's the same .NET New behind that? I mean,
No, I think there's a .NET generator tool
that's
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
.NET. It's not .NET
dedicated
New.
tool.
It's the CLI tool. So it's like a different .NET commands. So.
Yeah, I'm not only a Docker noob, but also ASP.NET noob. Anyway, that's so far for scaffolding. I think Maarten now has the Space plugin, right? And Space is pretty cool. In case you haven't heard about it before, it's our team environment with a whole lot of stuff in it, and Maarten will show a bit about the plugin.
Yeah, I'm not going to go in too much detail, but just to give you a quick overview of what is Space, because this is a Rider and ReSharper release party. So Space, the plugin is part of that, but Space shouldn't be part of that, just in case. So Space is indeed a product or a service actually that you can use to work together as teams. You can create Git repositories. There's package repositories as well for Docker, for NPM, for NuGet, and so on. There's automation, which can allow, which lets you do continuous integration and continuous deployment if you want. So it's really an all-in-one solution where you have everything that a software developer or a software team needs to start working together on a project. There's also a free version that you can start using. So if you want to give it a try, do sign up. And with that, I'll quickly show you the plugin in action. So in Rider, the Space plugin does not ship by default, so you will have to go into the settings, into plugins, go to Marketplace, and then search for JetBrains Space there. I already installed it, and you'll see that Space is installed in my Rider IDE. Once you have that one, you'll see that there's a Space icon on the right top side of the toolbar here. I already logged in, so you'll see a fake profile image because I'm using our demo instance there. And once you log in, you can essentially start cloning repositories from whatever you have in your Space instance. So if you have multiple repos there, you can do that here. Just clone whatever project you have there, pick the directory on your local hard drive, and clone and start working with that. What's also interesting is that the Space plugin also comes with code reviews. So if you're actually using Space to do code reviews and all of that, you'll get, thanks to the plugin, the Space code review side window here, where you'll see all open reviews. You can filter by those that include your changes or need your action and actually require you to review something. For every review, you can dive into the details, and you'll quickly see the entire conversation history of all the review comments that have been added in the past. You can go in there and reply here and type something, send that out to the server as well. There's also the list of files that have changed. So inside of your merge request, you will see that a number of files have changed. You can go in there, look at the diff. And what is interesting is that for, well, not obviously the entire project model, but for a lot of the things that you will see in code, Rider will actually give you suggestions on what has changed and so on, just like in a traditional diff. Now, of course, this is all Kotlin code, so that won't go too well in Rider, so that's why you don't see a lot of things happening. But if you have typos, if you have unused variables, things like that, it will actually give you some information about the things that you can remove. And then that's essentially everything that is in the plugin there. Now, as .NET advocates, we felt that we should be adding some .NET stuff as well. So what you can do is, if you're using Space to do your NuGet package hosting and you're using the private NuGet feeds that are in Space, you can also install another plugin, which is the Rider NuGet credential provider for Space. It's a plugin to the plugin that we have in Space there. Makes it kind of confusing. But anyway, it adds something on top. And what it adds is that whatever NuGet packages you consume from your Space instance, Rider will already authenticate. So what you see here is that we have a NuGet.config where we are consuming something from our private Space repository that we have there. If you start using the NuGet client, you will see that if you select that specific feed, that the packages show up and all of the authentication just works because you have logged in using the Space plugin that is there. And with that, I think I've covered space in a whirlwind overview, but warp speed because it's
Should I say thanks, Maarten Climber?
I was going to ask, when do we get our space doppelganger profiles? I'm just looking forward to that, I guess.
I think Matthias is there already.
I didn't create myself, but I appreciate it. Maarten, I do have one question. It's quite a bold question, actually, but I will still put it here for you to address in 10 seconds. So why would I choose Space over GitHub or Atlassian? There are already so many tools that do this. Why yet another?
I think I'll answer that with the all classic answer, which is it depends. So if you have something that works for you, absolutely stick with it, keep using it. We have Space because first of all, we needed this for ourselves inside JetBrains. And second of all, if you're using our IDEs anyway, we can give you a better experience if you're using Space than when you would be using one of the competing products there, because their APIs may not always expose everything that we want to do and things like that. So the experience is over the years going to get much better than with all of the others. Which doesn't mean, by the way, that we're not no longer going to support the others. That's an important point to make there.
Okay. Oh, my connection is a bit wonky. I hope you still hear me. I do have a second question by T-driven dev. Private NuGet feeds in Space, so the cloud wasn't good enough anymore.
Absolutely, space is more vast than the clouds can ever be. So host everything in Space. Yes.
Okay. Let's head over to my next part. And let me see. I got to jiggle a bit with my different screens here. I hope this is the correct one. Yes, it is. So I want to show you a few things about ReSharper still. And as many of you probably know, ReSharper is actually also inside Rider. So it just runs as a secondary process, but features all the language analysis, refactoring stuff, at least for the .NET languages. And some things I want to show you here is we all have started to love the new tuple types, and what we've added actually is, and this is not something that is very easy to implement, but what we've done is to allow you to rename a tuple type, the different tuple items basically, which then propagates to all the other places where it's actually used. So for instance, and that didn't work in our previous versions that we had, but now you see we have two methods here. One is bar, which calls foo, and foo has this long INumable of a tuple type. And inside here, I'm iterating over that. And when I change the message here, and for the sake of just simplicity, and I will add a 2, then this even propagates to the method that actually uses this signature right here. And that's a pretty cool thing. I guess I haven't been in the situation where I don't want this behavior. So this is actually what I expect. But on a on a language level, it would still be totally fine to have the one called message 2 and the other just message. But yeah, we kind of want to have those in sync. Another thing I want to show you is, and maybe you have missed that because for the last version we didn't have a release party, but we have the double tap on control to let you push to hint, right? And that's a really neat little feature, because also here in my for each you see if I have that deactivated, I basically blend out all the noise. But as soon as I want to have more information about my code, I just double hit my control key, and it uses the push to hint feature. The first thing that has also been there before is it also shows you about implicit conversions. So for instance, in this case, the type AA has an implicit conversion to string. So that is shown in this case. And also, I mean, C# can be a tricky language in some places, right? And in this case, for instance, we actually have 2 conversions that happen. And in that case, we are made aware with just this little tooltip that we can see, and otherwise, well, we still have the icon. Inside that, let me just quickly switch because I forgot that one solution uses a different target framework. Another thing that's really cool is Substring now has the ability to use the range indexer. And as you know from some other quick fixes that we have, that can be applied to your whole solution, project folder, however you would like that. And you can also, of course, change the severity. Now, I do have to say, currently, it only works for the zero-based substring, but I'm really looking forward. I think we will see that for arbitrary values as well. But this is more like a first step, let's say. But yeah, and it also works for the slice method. Yeah, so if you're using span of t slice, then this will also convert to range expressions if you like. So I mentioned it before already about the expand string selection. So I'm quite a fan of that, and that has been improved to also work in injected languages. So here we have a regular expression. You don't actually need that. I would just say it. You don't actually need that comment, but you can also use Alt-Enter to actually mark it as a .NET regular expression. But then you can see how the expression is actually understood. So not just for code completion, etc., but also now for expand string selection, and will always select the next meaningful part of our string. Let's go back here. Another thing I want to show you, and I think that's the last for ReSharper, is in terms of unit testing, we've added a couple of things. And I guess the most impactful, although I never had to deal with that issue, but in case your tests are running a secondary process and they actually finish, and this was inconclusive. Let's try again. I don't know what happened. Inconclusive again. Okay, I have no idea. Not sure if I want to dive into actually trying why. Let's try it. Maybe just I need to rebuild or something. Let's see. Otherwise, I would just explain it in verbal form. Yeah, still, unfortunately. But let's assume your tests are actually creating a secondary process. Then usually you would kind of like to know that there are orphan processes, and that now is possible. So as soon as a test session has finished and ReSharper notices there's an orphan process, you will get a dialog, and you can choose either to ignore for future test runs, or you might want to kill the process or something. And that I can at least show you that in the options dialog. So let's see here, test runner. These child processes would then show up here, and you could remove them, or remove them in case you don't want them anymore. And the second thing that has been added to unit testing, at least the more interesting ones, is support for VS Test adapters. So for a lot of other test adapters that are out there that basically use the VS Test infrastructure, we have support now, and you can enable that, and then either save on your either on solution level or computer global level. Okay, I think that was it for ReSharper. There are a bunch more features, language features, which are there. But I guess let's start at this point. And I think the next one is Matt with Unity, right?
Can I quickly jump in, because there's actually some more cool stuff in ReSharper that Rachel might have on her machine.
I do.
I forgot. Then I switched to Rachel's machine, okay?
Oh, yeah,
It's there
well, that's
already.
mine.
There
Yes,
we are.
so route templates and dealing with routes in ASP.NET. So this is really nice, great. Like, there's tiny little features that make it so much easier for you to do your work. That's what this is. I love this kind of stuff. So the first one would be if we are coding along and we just want completion. Now, normally in a string, it's just a string, but not when it's a route template and not with ReSharper. So here, if I start with a bracket, it notices what I have as my arguments here and allows me to select them so that I could continue building my route. So that's kind of a cool thing, right? That I could do that and pick out either of these or both or however I want them to be. So that's pretty cool. So we get completion. I also get to add and remove parameters. For example, I have this HTTP GET marker, and it does not have the matching parameter. So I could just come to this parameter, do an Alt-Enter, and add it to the route template, and boom, there it is. Or conversely, if I say I didn't have it in my argument signature, I could come in here and do an Alt-Enter and add it in this way. So either way, it works. So back and forth to remove them or modify them, or as I add them, anything else that I want to add in here that wasn't before, I just Alt-Enter. Oops. First, it wanted me to apply the refactoring for changing the signature, and I could do that, and then I can also add this in. Notice a few other things that it does as well. It adds some constraints, such as types, and also other type of constraints like numeric, alpha, or a regex even, anything like that. So as I come in here, I could just do a little colon after the type, and I could pick out exactly what I want it to be. I could pick out the length, or min or max, or what type it should be. So a decimal or an int. In this case, I would want it to match. And I could pick out int. And I think in Rider that might actually give me a little, or I may have to build it just to get a little squiggly if I do pick out the wrong type. It should yell at you, but it didn't yell at me then, but I think maybe because I didn't save and build. Also, another fun little thing is our rename refactoring. I mean, that's not new. I mean, we've had that for a long time, but if we do it in a route template, and I just do my rename refactoring, so I change it, and now it wants to add the parameter in. Okay, go ahead and add it. Oh, this time it didn't want to work for me. So normally if let me try to rename it the other way. So if I come in here and rename it in the code, so this is still a little bit new. So if I apply rename refactoring, you'll see that it does pick it up everywhere. There we go. So it picks it up everywhere. So it picks it up in the route templates and in my variables and anywhere that it's found in the code. And we're working on it. I think I just discovered a new little bug in which it should do that also out of the route template as well, and the other way around. So we have all these nice little things that you can do, or enhancements to what are normal features of ReSharper and Rider, but extracted out to route templates as well. One more thing that we have is if I have multiple action results, and within them I have a same pattern of a route template repeated and repeated, I can go to that template and do an Alt-Enter and then just push them all up to the controller, so that this way I'm not repeating myself over and over. Now once it pushes it up, I now have these empty routes, so I may want to change them around or add different things in to make it, go to the appropriate route. But it does consolidate them all up here to the controller. And then I could just continue working on these routes as I need to. So that's some of the stuff we have for route templates. A few small things, but they're pretty effective. So that's what we got.
Sorry, not unmuted yet. Okay, so now it's Matt's turn, right?
Yeah, I think I get to go again.
Add to stream.
There we go. That's me. So I'm going to talk about some Unity stuff. So I know we've got a couple of people in the comments there who will be using Rider with Unity, which is nice to see. We've got a ton of features for Unity. Within Rider itself, we do a whole load of fun and interesting things. And we've got a few more this release as well. And just interestingly, Matthias calling out the hint for the inlay hint there for type conversion. That's actually something which I think is really useful for various cases inside Unity as well. So for example, if you've got a vector 2 and you're trying to apply it to a vector 3, there are implicit conversions for that already, and it can be kind of a bit of a lossless thing here. So for example, we're passing in a vector which has got an X and a Y component into a 3D vector, and the Z component will just be initialized to 0. And that can be something which will be it could introduce a very subtle bug because you're trying to use the wrong types there and not initializing something. But having this hint to call that out, it can be something which is really useful and really good. So thanks for calling that one out, Matthias. That's a good one. Some of the few things that we've added for this release extend Rider's really cool features of looking at how Unity uses your project. So Unity will, it's got a lot of assets as part of the project there. An asset which describes a scene, which describes an object, which is a prefab, or all sorts of things like that. We actually index those assets as well and see where your code is being used from inside those assets. And so here we've extended that in this release to include animations as well. So we've got an animation here, just a random animation, which is nice. And it's saying here we've got 2 asset usages, and we can see it's actually being used inside a character animation. If I pop that into the results list here, I can see now it just shows me where they are in the file structure, in the animators folder, in the character animation controller, and it shows me exactly whereabouts they're being used as part of that. If I had this project open, I could double click on those and it would actually navigate to that animation for me and highlight them as well, which is very cool and useful. The other thing we've got with animations is now, because we actually understand animations, we can now do as well validation and code completion of your animator states, which is really useful. So we can now make it very easy for you to update and get those done. And if you had another one, another state there which actually isn't defined, Rider will let you know that that's actually an undefined state there. And so you'd get a runtime error, but we're trying to call it out for you upfront in the editor before you've actually had to run it at all. So there's, again, a really useful way of using the information within the project and bringing it into the code editor itself. I'm going to swap projects for a sec. No, not actually. I'm going to stay there. I'm going to swap files. That's what I'm going to do. Another feature which we've got as well is that we understand how Unity is going to be using your project. And we do that in several ways. So for example, we will highlight some of the methods that Unity calls implicitly, sort of by reflection, and show that they're being used by Unity. So if you've got your update method, your start, and your awake method, we'll highlight those as being event functions. In fact, you can see that here. We've got an event function indicator above this method here. But we've also got an interesting thing here where we mark some items as frequently called. This is code that is called in the update method. Update is going to get called every single frame. If you're at 60 frames a second, 120 frames a second, that code is going to get called a lot. And you want to be careful about the kinds of code you're calling in there. You want to avoid some expensive APIs like get component and so on. And we do that, and we actually propagate that information along. So set invincible explicit here isn't one of Unity's special methods that gets called by reflection. It's called by another method, and eventually it'll get called by from update. And sometimes it can be tricky to see where that's coming from. So I can see this is frequently called, but I want to know how. And if we click this frequently called link at the top there, we now get a little pop-up menu, and one of the items here is show incoming performance critical calls. And if we click that, we now get to see a tick. Let me show it on a more simple example first. Let's go to game states. Oh, wrong one. Game states. And if I find update UI, there we go. So this is just a nice simple example here. Again, this one's frequently called. And we can see game updates. Update UI is called by the tick method, which is then called from the update method. And that is our frequently called event function. So we can get a nice simple call stack, effectively, and see where all the calls are coming from and how it links back to an update method. If we do it on something a little more interesting, such as this set invincible explicit, we get to see that we've got, again, we got our tick method taking us back to updates, but we've got a few other methods as well, which we can just keep on stepping down into until finally we're going to get eventually down to an update method. The reason I wanted to show you this was because you can see we've only got a few items going on here. This is very similar to an existing feature we've got. If you use Alt-Enter, we've got an incoming calls item here. And it's the same sort of thing, but we filter it for the frequently called. So if we've got it here, we actually show more items. I've lost track of where I am. We actually show more items in the list here. And when we use the link from frequently called and use the show incoming performance critical calls, it will filter it down so that it's only the calls that get you down to updates. That's a nice way of seeing why a method is frequently called. We do the same thing for burst compiled methods as well. So we understand when a burst compiled, when a method is going to be burst compiled, and all the methods it calls will also be burst compiled. So we propagate that around your code. And so you will see now a method flagged up as saying this is burst compiled, and you can then sort of follow that back and see where it's being used from a burst compiled context. We've got a couple of other options here as well, which are very useful. You can also disable a method and say, this one isn't an important one, I don't care. And now all of a sudden our frequently used flag has disappeared. And so that's a nice way of sort of saying that this bit of code it doesn't have to be quite so important. So next thing I want to show you is some changes we've made for debugging. I've got a let's close that one down a bit. I've got a simple demo app here. I've got my project here. We've added some support for debugging serialized properties, and if I just attach the debugger there. Serialized properties are very powerful. It's everything in Unity is serialized data. It's if you're working with editor windows and editor extensions, then you're working with serialized data. You get a stream of objects, serialized properties inside an object, and it can be really quite tricky to understand what's going on. And so we've added a bit of help in the debugger there. So if I select a serialized property, a serialized asset I've got there, I've got an editor window which I can attach the debugger to, and we can have a look at what's going on. So in the debugger, we've got the normal sort of debugger view. We've got a call stack here. I've added the serialized object itself as just as a variable in the variables window. And one thing you can see that we've added straight away is serialized properties. So for every serialized object, you can immediately get down to the serialized properties, and you can start walking into the children that are in there. So you can actually see the entire stream, and you can see things like an integer or a string, and you can see these values. One of the things we do is we hide all of the bits of information that are irrelevant. We've got everything still there in the raw view. So if I scroll that down, you can still see things like the vector 2 and 3 value indexes, which make no sense because it's an int type. So we filter all those down and hide that kind of stuff and give you the information in a nice, easy way to work with. If we've got an array, we show the array elements. And if we've got a string, you can actually see that it's an array of characters. And also, if we've got a custom object, such as a custom structure, then we get to see the fields and properties that are part of that serialized view. So it makes it just a little bit easier to work with serialized properties there, because you get to view it in a much more natural way, see the children, see the shape of the stream, and work with it like that. While we're talking about debugging, a little useful hint here is a simple change in the. I'll just show that again. Actually, we've got, if you want to attach to a Unity process, such as a player, a desktop player, or a player on a mobile device or a console, you can use this attach to Unity process menu, which pops up a dialog and shows you all of the different players that are available on the network. Certain conditions have to be met for this to work correctly. You have to build with the as a development build. You have to have script debugging enabled. You have to have firewalls correctly enabled and everything. We've added a link down here to this dialog to take you to a troubleshooting guide, which has opened on another screen. Bring it over here, which has got a whole bunch of information as to help you walk through that and work with that. This is especially important on the Mac because we've discovered recently that the Mac actually has two firewalls, not just one, and the one which you control through the user interface and the system preferences isn't always the one that will block the traffic that we need to be able to talk to networked players. So this link here, it could be very useful and help you get network players working. Okay, so what did I want to show next? So yeah, just quickly then to round up, we've got a couple of other useful features. If I close that down, with our testing support, we have got unit tests here. We can run the tests in the Unity process. We can run them in edit mode, in play mode, in edit and play mode, and so we can get to run all of your tests all at once. And what we can also do as well is we can run code coverage for that as well. If we run this now, we have to restart Unity, the editor itself, with code coverage enabled. And then we can capture that information, run the tests, capture that information, and display that actually inline in the editor. I won't do that now because that'll take a couple of minutes to get going. And I just want to show the last couple of things here as well. A couple of lovely little quick fixes and changes. If we're creating a new item here, we have grouped together our scripts and shaders. So if you want to create a new script, then you get the choice of items going on here as well. And if we are, where are we, directory? If we're creating anything in the editor, we then get a different list of items here as well. So it just makes it a little bit easier to create a script or a shader file and use the correct type of template there for you. We've also made some changes to how the quick dock works, as Matthias was showing earlier with the hover properties there. If you hover over items now and bring up the quick dock, we've got the link to the external documentation. We had this before. We've made it a little bit more reliable, and more importantly, now it takes you directly to the correct version of the documentation. So we used to take you to the latest version, which is on either the installed version on your local disk or take you to the local version on the website. We will now take you to the correct version for the version of Unity that your project works with. And there are a couple of other things in there as well. So the Unity log player, if you're not aware of this, we've got a Unity tool window, so been in there for a while. And it gives you a lot of useful information. It basically brings the console from Unity over into the editor for you, and you can use that then to click and navigate around within the code, which is really useful. We've made a bunch of improvements there for performance reasons, which is nice. And finally, I guess, not necessarily talking about Unity, but the game dev work we've been doing, we've also got Rider for Unreal. This is still in preview, so it's not part of this release directly, but we have just updated that preview to match the current version of Rider 2021.1, and we've brought Mac support in there as well. So you can build an Unreal project, do native debugging, and work with that all on a Mac. And there we're not using the sort of the standard Visual Studio style solution and project files. We're actually using the U project files directly. So we're sort of like a new sort of experimental version of the project model where we read the Unity project file, the Unreal project files directly. We're really rather excited about that. You can sign up and download that for free and give it a go if you're using Unreal. And I guess that's me really then. Again, unless there are any questions about Unity or Unreal support.
Not as far as I can see.
Great stuff. Feel free to ping me if anyone does have any questions.
I do have to say it's a little bit beside, but Unity, the plugin is actually developed out there in the open. So for anyone who's interested in Rider plugin development or even ReSharper. Oh, actually, there was one question, but I gotta finish my sentence. So that is really like a go-to place for anyone who's interested in plugin development. And yeah, I basically copied a couple of features that were really cool.
Yeah, this is a mature plugin now. So this plugin has been around for a good few years. It started life as a plain ReSharper plugin. It's still available as a ReSharper plugin as well. Doesn't have all of the features that Rider does, but the ReSharper plugin is available there. So it's mature. It's got a lot of features. It does a lot of things that various other plugins don't do. So it is useful as an example of what you can do in a ReSharper plugin, a Rider plugin.
Yeah, there was a question actually about Unity in ReSharper, but that might have been a while ago, and maybe you have answered that already. But yeah, basically, this plugin also comes for ReSharper. It's a bit stripped in functionality. I mean, Rider has a bit more, right?
So the main things are that Rider has integration with Unity itself, so it can run Unity unit tests directly in the Unity process, whereas ReSharper doesn't talk to the Unity process at all. So that kind of integration is not available, but it has all the language analysis, all the inspections for sort of best features, best practices, and things like the performance profile, the performance critical indexing. I can't speak. The performance critical context indicators, and also burst analysis, all those kinds of things there. So there's a lot in there already.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So for the last part, I will switch to mine again. And actually, I got it working. So that is something I still want to show you. So here, unit test has finished. CMD is still open. And now you get this little dialog where you can basically say what should happen and if that should also happen the next time. So you don't want to bother the next time. Other than that, that was the main part. I do want to refer to some of our, first of all, thanks to all of our advocates for showing their favorite things. But I do still have to refer you to some of our online material that we have. I mean, like written material. Like here we have a What's New page for ReSharper, Rider, and IntelliJ. And it really makes sense to check this out as well. So for instance, we still have like something editor config, for instance, we couldn't cover today. Rider, I actually don't know, but yeah, for VCS, there were a couple of changes. IntelliJ, Rider inherits most of the features that are language agnostic. We just inherit from IntelliJ, and it really makes sense to check this out, like WSL support or WSL2 support. So yeah, make sure to check this out. Since I see that, I will also take the chance to make a little bit of advertisement for our JetBrains.net days online, which happen in May 11 and 12. And you will see a couple of faces again from us actually hosting. So there's I'm not sure how many sessions there are.
Yeah, Maarten? I think we have 14 sessions and 14 community speakers just talking about what they love. I have seen a dry run so far of a talk on source generators, which was really awesome. So I'm really looking forward to being able to share that with the world at the events. And there's a couple more that are definitely worth attending. So do check that out.
Yeah. Make sure to check this out. One thing, and I forgot, what was it? Yeah, actually quite versatile topics. Yeah, so across the board, basically, it's not just so deep about language style and source generators, but very versatile. So, for instance, Cosmos DB, I remember we had a session about that, and plenty of others. I think this is it. At this moment, thanks again to my colleagues. Thanks for you, of course, for watching, and we hope it was interesting to you. Thanks to .NET Foundation for letting us double stream this also through their channel. And yeah, I hope you all liked it. And as soon as I find the button, I will also make the outro. So goodbye, everyone, and see you next time for the next release party. Bye-bye.